Good evening and welcome to Marshall Live. I'm your host, online editor of The Spectator Australia, Alexandra Marshall. Cease and desist with free speech. That is the message from political regimes around the West as they, one by one, draft threatening letters to Twitter's CEO, Elon Musk. The European Union, who have been embracing their fascist roots regarding online censorship for decades, issued Musk with a public notice last night over a chat to be held between Elon Musk and US presidential candidate Donald Trump. Thierry Breton reminded Musk that while freedom of expression is effectively protected, it totally isn't if expressing opinions, reporting on the news, or hosting a discussion with certain populist figures contributes to what they vaguely describe as detrimental effects on civic disorder. Now, instead of the left's mantra of speaking truth to power, we're now being told to shut up to keep the peace. Silence has never kept the peace. It has only made the eventual conflict worse. And gosh, it's a shame the EU doesn't feel the same way and the same amount of moral outrage regarding its policies and actions.
Wir haben so vieles geschafft, wir schaffen das.
We can do this, a rallying call made by Angela Merkel a year ago. Germany took in over 1 million refugees in 2015.
We can do this. That's what she said. May we remind the EU that it was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, by her own admission, who brought the first million Third World, predominantly Islamic refugees into Europe in 2015.
But the mass sexual assaults in Cologne on New Year's Eve and radical Islamist terrorist attacks have swung public opinion.
And by the way, when they talk about Cologne, they're talking about the incident where 1,200 women were sexually assaulted in one night, probably the worst case of mass rape outside of wartime ever. But 9 years later, people in Europe aren't being incited by Twitter. They are expressing their frustration at the EU for throwing open the gates of hell and forcing them to sit silently as their nations are picked apart. Europe has embraced mass migration for a decade. And are things better? Are they enriched? The Third World mass migration crisis in the UK started with Germany. It started with Merkel. It did not start with Elon Musk or small British communities minding their own business. This could be the third time that Germany has laid the groundwork for a war in Europe, and they'll do anything to stop people talking about it. Now, UK-based political commentator Leilani Dowding pointed out how this has impacted her home.
The government also refused to look at any of the policies or anything that they've done that could have led to this anger. So, for example, being soft on crime, the immigration policies where they're letting many illegals and we're paying for the illegals to be housed and to be fed.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Governments that make free speech, national pride and civil liberty their enemy are dictatorships in the making. If the government is protecting people who fly foreign flags and brandish signs made by socialist authorities, that government is working against the people. Keir Starmer is frightened of free speech because he knows progressive politics has wrecked the UK. He has lost control. He doesn't want you to say it because it's true.
What Keir has also done is he's changed the definition of violence. Violence has always been physical. I'm against any kind of violence at protests. I'm totally against smashing things up, trying to throw things at police officers, arson, totally against any of that kind of violence. But what he's done now is he's trying to change it to say online violence. But violence is physical. So like we've seen through many things, they're changing the definition of words to suit themselves.
And here is the problem with governments and authorities moderating free speech. Anything they say is illegal can be policed, but they get to define what illegal speech looks like. Essentially, this means that no speech is protected unless it is explicitly put under a different law. And that's exactly what's happening with the UK's blasphemy laws. The UK has decided to protect the dominant religion of those who illegally migrated to the UK, thus, in effect, protecting the government's open border failure. Islamophobia is a proxy, a loophole, a dangerous legal trick. Criminalising Islamophobia means you cannot criticise the mobs of machete-wielding men. Soon you won't even be allowed to say they exist. There'll be a conspiracy theory and you'll be a spreader of misinformation and disinformation. And if you post a video to prove the truth, you'll be thrown in jail. This is where the UK is at.
I know that there's going to be a lot of asylum seekers housed in a Premier Inn that the government have just bought close to where I live. But because of these new emergency powers, we're not going to be able to talk about it in a negative light.
Silence. They want nothing but silence. Twitter isn't causing civil unrest. Governments are causing civil unrest. Left-wing rags such as The Guardian have platformed spurned Twitter employees and pseudo-intellectuals who preach their moral superiority while saying that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer should issue an arrest warrant for Elon Musk. Arrest the man that spent $44 billion saving free speech. Politicians have never forgiven Musk for breaking their narrative. What is the UK's plan here? Empty 40,000 criminals onto the streets, rapists, thieves, stalkers and thugs, so the government can lock up anyone who says things about the government that they don't like? Is Starmer criminalising the news? Is he outlawing criticism of his regime? We are joined now by Ralph Babette to discuss free speech.